40-year-old Dave Hogbin was about as close to a real-life superhero genius as you could get. As a freshly graduated high school student, he first went into real estate, but that was just so he could pay to study nuclear medicine. But it wasn't enough for the Newcastle in New South Wales native to just treat cancer and organ function in this ultra-specialized field. Nope, he went back to medical school to become a general practitioner on top of that, where he met his beloved wife, Jane. Together they had 3 sons, aged 7, 5, and just 2 years old. Jane, also a general practitioner, kept a busy household. Obviously, work kept them plenty busy, but they also kept up with 3 very typical boys who loved nothing more than to camp, fish, catch bugs, and climb just about every tree in the vicinity. Not that Jane or Dave minded, they loved the chaos of a house full of life and laughter. And if given enough time, they probably would have added another lively child to the mix. Unfortunately, Mother Nature does not give leniency to people just because they're good and kind, or because they fill the world with more joy than they found it. At the end of July 2024, the Hogbin family took a rare few weeks off. They chose this time specifically to travel. June and July are super busy tourist seasons in Australia, but by the end of July leading into August, the dry season starts, and it's usually when locals take the time to catch up with their own vacations to avoid all the tourists. The family packed their car and started a leisurely 1,800-mile trip from Newcastle to Cape York, the northernmost point in Australia, along with another couple and their 2 children. They had 2 whole weeks planned out, a different camping spot every night, and a new sight to see, with all of the pictures that a memory card could possibly hold. The first week went fabulously. Their 7- and 5-year-olds each caught their first fish, much to their father's delight. The boys climbed so many trees that Jane spent more than one evening prying splinters out of their palms with a pair of tweezers by the fireside. They made it all the way to the northernmost point of Australia, spent 2 days there, and started their journey back. Just a little over 300 miles back down, they stopped at Cooktown, a deeply historical town in the outback, centered around the infamous gold rush and the deeply cherished indigenous community. They arrived on Friday the 2nd, but there was just so much to see in Cooktown that they decided to spend another night there. After a morning of visiting the museum and a short hike through the rainforest, the boys were all tuckered out. Jane and Dave hadn't had much time to themselves, what with friends and kids running around, that they jumped at the chance to take a leisurely stroll next to the Annan River when the other couple offered to watch the boys while they took their afternoon nap. The Annan River is a wide expanse of deceptively still water. Even though the surface might seem calm, the currents are quite strong, even during the dry season. The bluffs that the high waters of the rainy season carve out when the river swells in summer drops down as much as 50 feet in some places when the water goes low in August. Most of that bluff is held together by tree roots that are as ancient as the gigantic crocs that infest those waters. It's a famous place to go and see monster freshwater crocodiles already. The locals call it Crocodile Bend for its famously large lizards. And Dave and Jane did indeed spy a few smaller specimens sunning themselves on the opposite bank. Their relaxed hike involved chit-chat about the boys' school, their oldest son's first venture into Little League rugby, and what they had in mind for their respective medical practices in the upcoming months. The moment that the 16-foot bluff gave away couldn't have come at a more unexpected time. Dave was walking on the side of the trail that was closest to the water. He was halfway through explaining a particularly challenging patient when the powdery dry wall of sand just gave out under their feet, cutting him off mid-sentence. The first boulder-sized mounds of clay cracked like thunder when it hit the water. Dave's feet slid down. One moment the ground beneath him was solid, and the next, the earth had turned to nothing but a plume of sandy nothingness. Both of them instinctively grabbed at each other's hands, gripping it fiercely in the midst of the dust cloud. Jane was still on shaky but ever so slightly more stable ground. Dave was dangling beneath her, tethered only by her arm. For a fraction of a second, their eyes met, wide with shock and fear. And then, Jane's feet started slipping too. The precarious stability of the bank couldn't hold her, and the 160 pounds that Dave's weight added to the equation. When her feet began to slide, Dave made a split-second decision that tells you everything you need to know about what kind of man he was. He let go. He knew that Jane couldn't hold on to him on her own, but he also knew that if they remained connected, both of them would go down. So he made the incomprehensibly brave decision to sacrifice himself rather than take them both down that 16-foot drop into croc-infested waters. Jane saw the resolve in his eyes just before he let go, and she managed a shout of protest just before he did. Dave released his only lifeline to save the mother of his children, his best friend, and the love of his life. Dave went tumbling, taking another avalanche of soil with him. He was swallowed by the dust cloud and the splash that reached well over Jane's head. By the time she grabbed onto an exposed root and hoisted herself up, Dave was gone, swallowed by the sand and the raging water. Jane tried to find a way down, but after 5 minutes of not seeing Dave and being unable to find a way down, she turned and ran for help. A group of strangers on the trail found the hysterical woman and phoned in for help. Rescue workers were on the scene quickly enough, but they were too late. The moment that cascade slammed into the water, it startled every crocodile in the nearby vicinity from their midday slumbers. With a fresh, living human in the water, Dave barely made it 20 feet with the current before he was grabbed up by a 16-foot croc, known by the locals by the battle scars on its snout. Dazed from the fall, unable to discern up from down, and already in the midst of drowning from the clay and water lodged in his airways, Dave didn't stand a chance. The hikers who alerted authorities swarmed the banks, looking for any sign of him, but Dave was dead and dragged away long before they or the rescuers even arrived on the shore. For 2 days, the searches went on, but it wasn't until residents reported an aggressive crocodile with scars on its nose 2.5 miles away from where Dave fell in that rangers finally found something. The animal was extremely territorial, necessitating its euthanization based on its extreme aggression alone. Some of Dave's remains were found inside its digestive tract, but a search of that area did not yield the rest of Dave's body. Most likely, the rest of Dave's remains were stolen by another crocodile, or several, when the larger one was taken out in the short time that rangers were busy with the necropsy. There's no telling which one of the dozens of other crocodiles in the area could have taken Dave, but at least the family got some part of him to bury. The funeral was crowdfunded by Dr. Dave Hogbin's many friends, colleagues, and scores of patients whose lives he was intricately part of. But most important of all, and the only silver lining that Jane can recall of this utterly tragic loss, is that the boys, who thought their dad was the toughest and most amazing man in the world, didn't have to witness their hero's final affliction.